Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on clinical SAS SDTM programming. In this video, we will see how to easily identify or remember the variables in SDTM VS domain. VS stands for vital signs and it is a findings domain as per SDTM domain classification. So let us assume that there is a clinical trial in which there are 4 visits, week 1, week 2, week 3 and week 4. And now let us assume that the subject has arrived at the investigator office at week 2 and the investigator has measured systolic blood pressure on left arm in sitting position for the subject, and he has measured it 3 times in the reading 1, reading 2 and reading 3. So and reported the result and the associated unit in 2 different units, original unit and also the standard unit. Now let us try to identify the variables that will be used to store this piece of information in SDTM VS domain. So every clinical trial would be associated with an identification number, and that identifier or the study identifier would be stored in a variable called study ID. And every subject who participates in a clinical trial would be given a unique identifier, and that unique identifier will be stored in a variable called USubj ID, which is unique subject identifier. So the SysBP or the systolic blood pressure is a abbreviation for SysBP is the abbreviation for systolic blood pressure, and this test name will be the short name of systolic blood pressure is SysBP, and that value will be stored in a variable called PS test CD. So here the systolic blood pressure is measured on the arm of the subject. So this arm information will be stored in a variable called location where particular test has been carried out, and within arm it can be on left or right. So we have this test being conducted on left arm. So we indicate or we use a variable called laterality VSLAT to store this value of left, and then the blood pressure could be collected in supine position, standing position or sitting position. So that position will be reported in a variable called VSPOS. And then it is also this test would have been performed on a particular date and time. That information or date of collection or on the date when the test has been performed will be put in a variable called VSTTC. So on this particular date, the reading systolic blood pressure has been measured thrice. So we have this something called as nominal time points, reading 1, reading 2 and reading 3. This particular information would be put in a variable called VSTPT time point. So on a particular week 2, so there are 3 readings are possible. Those nominal time point values of reading 1, reading 2 and reading 3, the text reading 1, reading 2, reading 2, reading 3 will be put in a variable called VSTPT. And now we know that the results reported by the investigator would be based on the local lab or local conventions, but that need not be the standard unit that has to be presented in the STTM domain. So we'll have 2 sets of variables and 2 sets of variables for result and units. Their original result and the standard result. So we have a variable called VSORRES. So which is used to store the original result which is reported. So and we use a variable called VSORRESU. So to store the original result units. So VSORRES is a character variable, and when coming to standard variable, we have 2 versions of result variables. One is numeric and the second one is character. So vital signs, standard, RES is for result, C is for character format. And then similarly for numeric result, we use a variable called VS, ST for standard, RES for result, N is for numeric. And then we use the variable VS, ST, RESU, which is for units. So this variable will be used to store the standard units. And then we have this information of visit on this particular collection is being made. Now let us try to identify some derived variables that can be used to uh, that will be created based on the collected variables. So let us now try to identify that. So we have this VS test CD, which is sysbp is being stored in that. So this is an abbreviated version of the test that is being conducted. So we put the full name or the full name of the test that is being conducted, which is systolic blood pressure in a variable called VS test. And in SDTM domains, whenever we collect a date, we also report the date in terms of relative study date. So that variable will be VS dy. So we just need to replace DTC with dy. And then this is VS TPT. This is a character version. So we also create a numeric version to store or sort the observation correctly. So we use a variable called VS TPT NUM to store the numeric version associated with the reading 1, reading 2, and reading 3. We may put the values like 1, 2, and 3 so that we can chronologically order these three readings. And then we have our visit variable. So we also have a numeric version for visit variable, which is visit now. So for every visit which is supposed to happen, it will be based on a planned schedule. The every visit should happen on a specific predefined day at plus or minus few days, which is based on the protocol. The planned study day on which the visit should have happened will be stored in a variable called visit dy. And then in findings domain, we derive the epoch variable based on the date of collection. So this is epoch. So these are some of the derived variables that will be created or the alternative numeric versions of the variable that can be identified using the collected information. Now let us try to identify how many number of variables we were able to identify with this flow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So if you try to remember this flow, you will be able to easily uh, recollect 20 variables which can be seen in vector science domain. So as this is a findings domain, we also create a flag called different flag. So that also can be added to this list. So we will be able to recollect overall 21 variables with this flow. Thank you for watching and keep learning.